Well, you don't know what it means to love others, yeah, oftentimes. Once you have some self-love, you start to understand what it also means to love other people as well.
Yeah.
Because you realise that how you're acting towards yourself should also be the way you act towards everybody. Yeah. So you know how we talked about accepting your emotions, for example.
Right.
Well, once you love others, you accept their emotions too. You know, when we talked about, you know, loving the truth, can we have that off, please? Thank you. When we love the truth, we'll, you know, for ourselves, we'll also love sharing the truth with others as well. When we love our, when we sort of have faith in our progress, you'll also have faith in other people's progress. So you won't always think like other people won't change, you know, that kind of feeling. You know? Yeah.
Can I also clarify? I know we're going to talk about other things, but when you said we're more comfortable with our emotions and feeling them, whatever they are,
Yeah.
we'll be more comfortable with others. Would that also mean that if someone came at me with anger, or that I'd be more comfortable? It wouldn't bother me as much as it might currently now, or
Yeah,
whatever.
sometimes you feel like laughing about it, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And even with feelings like arrogance and stuff, doesn't
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
Well, that's good news.
You feel if someone's condescending with you, you don't sort of, you don't respond to the bait of it, I suppose.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I suppose you have your feelings about it, don't you? But you...
Well, not really, no. You get to the stage where when people have negative emotions towards you, that you don't absorb any of them.
Wow.
So that means, of course, you don't feel upset about them having those emotions towards you either.
Is that because you now have much more of God's love in you, or
Yeah.
that you've processed your feelings, or both?
Both. You feel loved by God, and you feel loved, you love yourself, so you don't expect anybody else to love you. And so when people treat you in an unloving manner, you don't feel that upset about it.
Wow.
You don't feel upset about it at all, actually. You might not stay around them, but you don't get all bitter and twisted about it. See, most people, when they're treated unlovingly, want to have some feeling of revenge.
Yeah.
And so you don't feel any of those feelings either. You don't feel feelings of revenge or hatred or rage towards the people. Yeah. So
Would you even, it seems to me from your guys' modeling that you have compassion.
yes, you have compassion, but that compassion is not expressed in the manner that you're pandering. You don't pander to it.
Right.
But also it can be quite interesting for the person, because, like, if they're angry with you and you're not affected by it,
Right.
then some people get even more angry, and other people all of a sudden just stop being angry with you. You know, it just depends on the person and their motivations. You know, what most of you don't realise at this stage is that almost every interaction you're having with another person is actually firstly on an emotional level.
Yes.
So there's emotions that are being felt by them and being felt by you, and the way those emotions interact will determine the outcome of your interaction. So even if you're discussing some intellectual matter, the emotions are actually determining the outcome of that discussion. And from God's perspective, the emotions are a more important part of the discussion than the words are.
That's the soul.
Because your emotions is the brain of your soul being expressed. The words are your intellectual mind turning oftentimes the emotions you have into words. But from God's perspective, what's going on at the soul level is the communication that's really going on. And so in the celestial heavens, there's not a need for a lot of words, because everybody can feel everybody's feelings. So it's like, for myself and Mary, like, Mary doesn't have to talk to me for me to understand her feelings. She doesn't have to discuss her feelings with me because I can feel what they are, so I don't need her to share with me what they are. And oftentimes I can describe back to Mary her emotions better than she can describe them to me anyway. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, so all I've got to do is really feel Mary, feel her feelings, and I know what they are. So, and I don't need to. Mary doesn't need to have a long-winded conversation with me about them. Sometimes she does, but often just for her own sake. Not. It's not so that I understand, because I already usually understand before she even says anything. So
seems like you understand all of us before we say anything. Well, I think why even try to mess around with you, because you already know. Sort of like, I'm not putting you up in God's because I know you wouldn't want that, but yeah.
It's good in a way, isn't it, that you can't present a facade.
It's wonderful. It's actually, particularly last week, I really felt the gift of you not pandering to my addictions with men. I really did. It was the first time I felt that, wow, this is a gift.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it when I first met you, as you, and I'm sure you know, because I really loved my facade a lot, as you pointed out in 2014.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was pretending I wasn't even angry.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But no, I really felt, wow, this is a gift. And it helps me give that gift to others now, too, when I feel I know a truth.
Yeah, a lot of times the power of an interaction is nothing to do with what you say.
Right.
It's got everything to do with whether you feed the addiction of the other person or you don't. And the more loving you become, the more you won't feel inclined to feed the addictions of others or yourself. And you'll find that others get fairly confronted by that initially. But then over time they realise, usually they end up realising they still care about them and love them, it's just not in the way they expect to be loved or cared about. So yeah, that's a very common thing. Most people who, and particularly most women who meet me, at first don't like me.
Well, I thought you really didn't like me. I mean, it was
That's
because you weren't pandering like other
That's
men
exactly
do,
what they
right?
think.
You weren't pandering to my nonsense.
That's right.
And so,
Yeah. And most men and women don't like me on sight, pretty much. And then over time, they realise that there's reasons in them as to why they didn't.
Yes.
They felt the way they did. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. And also, most people think that when I treat them well, they think it's because that means that their soul condition is very good. And once I start talking to them about their sin, they realise that actually I'm seeing all their sin, and then they think that must mean I don't like them. So it's sort of like, it's really strange how people respond, because on one hand they're saying when you do like them it's because of them, and then and then on the other hand they're saying when they think that I don't like them, when I don't feed their addictions, that's because of me. It's sort of like, and they don't see it that both cases are about them. You know what I mean? So yeah, so it's interesting, the interactions that happen at the soul level that most people are not aware of.
Right.
It's very rare for people who, you know, are coming from a place on earth, you know, where they've, you know, had the kind of history most of you have had. Very rare for a person to be really aware at an emotional level what's going on in an interaction with somebody else. They can generally feel something's wrong, but they don't really know what is. So it's really interesting seeing people's responses sometimes. Yeah. And it's interesting because the more developed you become, the more you can feel why they are doing what they're doing, but you can also feel that they have no idea they're doing what they're doing at the same time.
Right.
And then it's just a matter of, well, how much do you say? Like, because, you know, obviously when I'm just seeing you for 5 minutes, it's not the right probably time or space or to say a lot about what's going on, you know.
Is it possible for us to meet with you in the sleep state and ask questions in the sleep state? Is that a possible thing?
Well, it's possible, but I'm trying to
Unlikely.
encourage you to develop your
Do it
relationship
yourself.
with God, not me.
Right on, right on.
So,
That's fine.
God is able to talk to every one of her children. I'm only able to talk to a limited amount. If you think about it from a practical perspective, even in the spirit world, it's rare to get anything more than a few million people together at one point. And so at the most, when you're in a, say, seminar type situation in the spirit world, at the most you can talk to a few million people, but you can't talk to many more than that at once, But God can talk to every one of her children instantaneously at all times. So, obviously it's far better you have a relationship with God than it is with me.
He's pretty darn straight.
Yeah. Yeah. But obviously we like to meet people, and obviously in the course of 2,000 years, Mary and I have met a lot of people. Many of those people are our friends, and most of the people in the celestial heavens are our friends, and so most of them have met us at some point. But in terms of our closest friends, well, they're the ones who are more closely aligned to what our desires are, our passions are about sharing truth and also helping helping people with truth, because it's what makes people happy. So our main focus is that. So, many of you will find you have different passions than we do.
Are you guys artists in the spirit world, like musicians and artists?
Yeah.
Or am I just making that up?
No, we are.
I feel that very deeply. I mean, yeah.
One day you might hear some of our music,
I love that.
see some of our art. To us, it's not anywhere near as important as
what we're
sharing with you. But we also have some fairly large houses in the spirit world, I suppose you would call them.
Well, what's coming up, guys?
But obviously to us they're not very important. So, but one day you might see some of them. Comforting. Yeah.
Do you know any of the people that were like in the the trilogy from Robert James Lee? There's like this like Omra, Mayuni. Like, do you know them? Like,
Some of them. We've met some of them. Many of them are not on the Divine Love Path. So.
Oh, really?
Oh.
Oh.
The whole trilogy of books are not about the Divine Love Path.
Oh.
I'm sorry, what books? I didn't hear the question.
The Robert James Lee's books,
Oh.
Through the Mist, the Gate, Life Elysian, the Gate of Heaven. A lot of people believe when they read them that they're about the Divine Love Path, but they're not.
Passes.
The pageant
See if I
messages.
can talk. Yes, that is.
Yeah, the pageant messages are about the Divine Love Path, yes. Yeah.
but it talks like a lot about God and the relationship.
Yes, but there's a lot of people not on the Divine Love Path who talk about God all the time, actually. But they don't have a personal relationship with God now. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that the major difference between the people that are talked about in Through the Mists and just the Divine Love Path and people who are on that in general?
Yeah, of course the major difference is the relationship with God, because the receiving love from God is all about your relationship with God. There are some in those RJLs who now have a relationship with God. And there are some who, but at the time of the writing of the books, they did not have a personal relationship with God. Yeah. One day we'll channel them for you and they can tell you how that changed. Yeah. But there's a lot of people who believe when they read the Robert James Lee's material that they believe it's all about the relationship with God, but it's actually not. And it's quite evident within the material if you think about it, because it's a lot about the physics and the physical parts of the spirit world, isn't it? The whole series of books. If you think about the Paget message in comparison, all the messages that were shared by the higher spirits in the celestial heavens, none of them hardly contained any information about their physical location of existence, or they were all about the spiritual truths we're trying to teach you, right? Because they are the most important things. They are the things that bring the biggest changes. So a lot of people, when they start investigating the spirit world, become very fascinated with the spirit world, but the fascination is often metaphysical. It's not, or what you call spiritual body associated information, not regarding information about the soul, and not regarding how to progress to the celestial heavens. So there's actually no information in the Robert James Lee's material about progressing to the celestial heavens.
So like the last one, I think,
Gate of Heaven.
Gate of
Yes.
Heaven. Like when he talks about like entering, that he has to pass the, like he's talking about, I thought he was talking about entering the seventh.
No.
No, oh my God, I misread it completely then.
No.
Oh God.
He has now entered, he's gone beyond the seventh sphere now. Afra, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But at the time, no, he hadn't. Yeah.
So
He imagined he had,
Oh my God.
which is a different thing than having done. Yeah.
Where's James Paget now?
We've talked to him some time ago. I think the last time we talked to him was about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
And at that stage, I think he was in the fifth sphere. Yeah.
Was Helen already in? Because in the Paget message, she seems like she was developing quite quickly.
Yeah.
Is she already in the Celestials and he's?
Oh, James Paget.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, he is in the seventh now.
Okay.
At this stage. We talked to him just recently, actually. Helen's in the celestial heavens.
Wow.
James is still in the seventh, and Dr. Stone was only just recently has moved to the celestial heavens. But Paget himself has yet to move to the celestial heavens. Yeah.
what about Constance and Juju, or Constance Juju?
Oh yeah, she's so wonderful.
You haven't checked in with her for a while.
Seventh, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seven.
Yeah.
Wow. She's not so-
Yeah.
You guys said that you were planning to travel for at least 6 months of the year.
Yeah.
Is there some sort of infrastructure, or like, do you have any ideas of how to maybe make that a more seamless process so that can be
Yes,
assisted?
we have ideas.
Yeah, we've got ideas, but it's difficult. It sort of boils down to how much money do you have versus how to use the money you have. You know what I mean? And so, you know, obviously the ideal circumstance when it comes to us travelling would be that each site we came to would be a regular thing we visit, and also that we sort of use the similar venue each time, and also that in the country there was already the speakers and the tech equipment, so we didn't have to travel with that. But I think it's going to be quite a few years, Miranda, before that happens, because the tech equipment alone costs us around $20,000 US, the stuff we travel with. And to do that, to set that up in every country would be $80,000 US. And, you know, that's way beyond our means at the current point to do.
Yeah, and we have to think about what's, like you said, what's the best way to use the money that we do have.
Yeah.
We, do you want to talk about this now, about
Yeah.
sort of our plans?
Do you want to talk about that?
Yes. Why don't I write some things
Maybe we'll give a
down?
bit of a summary and then we can answer
Yeah,
questions.
okay, I'll give a summary. So basically we're thinking that, like, our dream is for the next 5 years, that we are overseas for 4 months in each of those years, and that we can travel in sort of the UK and Europe and Canada, well, the Americas basically. It might be South America, North America, Canada, somewhere in there. And our purpose for doing that is because we want to be able to give people the opportunity to engage with us, I suppose, about what we're teaching, because I think I think, as you would have felt from this weekend, there's been a lot of things, assumptions that you've had that are challenged. There's been a lot of things that you feel differently when you're in our presence. There's a lot of, it's a bit more personalised, isn't it? And over the last few years at home, we'll talk about this more in detail in a bit, but we've been setting up a non-profit organisation called God's Way. And in that process, because that's taken a lot of time and effort and energy on our part, we haven't travelled, we haven't output videos, as you know, but what we have been doing is meeting with a group about this size, a bit smaller, of people who want to sort of be involved in the setup of God's Way to varying levels of degree. They want to be there, but some of them just come once a week and do a little bit of environmental work, and some of them are more engaged throughout the week, each week. But we've been having small group discussions with those people, and what I noticed is that had a similar impact as it's had on you guys this weekend, but imagine that every week. So where you're getting sort of challenged on your assumptions, there's different things being exposed, and you're having the opportunity to go away and really feel about God's path in a new way, or see things about yourself and reflect on yourself in a way that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't have had this personal engagement. So the impetus for this trip was that I suppose in particular felt like I wanted other people around the world to have that same opportunity. Because it's precious, I think. And so what our idea is to be able to do that regularly. Obviously we can't do it every weekend with you, but once a year or a few times a year if we have a few events in your country, then you have that opportunity. And so we decided that for the next 5 years we'd try and do that. On this trip, obviously, we've done a lot of stops. We've done a lot of, I think, can you remember?
15 really.
15 different stops, 15 different set up, pack up, do the whole thing. So 15 different events we've done, and we've done that in 9 different locations. So 9 times we've moved, and in 4 months. That's too much for us, and we're tired at this point. So we've been looking at how we can do that better in coming years, and we've decided at this stage we think we will just have 4 locations around the world rather than 9 different ones. So somewhere in the United Kingdom, somewhere in Europe, probably Portugal at this stage, somewhere in Canada, and somewhere in the US. So just 1 spot in each of those places. And in that place, at each location, we would have 1 large weekend event where, however many people wanted to come could come. So that might be 200, it might be 100, but it's, given the figures that we had on this trip, it would probably be 100 at least in each continent. And then after that, we might have some smaller group interactions similar to this one, depending on our time and energy levels. And we probably make that a bit more spontaneous rather than pre-planned months in advance.
So the requirement would be that you have to come to the first one to come to the other ones.
Yeah. So that we're not repeating the same material. And it is very good if you have seen or heard what we've done up to this point on this trip, isn't it? Some of you've done that, and it's helpful, isn't it? So we'd also probably put that as somewhat of a prerequisite as well, that you keep up a little bit so that the material being presented each time is extending on the prior material, because that benefits not just you, it benefits everyone who's going to later listen to everything that's been presented. Yeah. So at this stage, our plan is to do that in the Northern Hemisphere summer months, that we would do that. So we keep changing a little bit. It's a bit of a sliding scale, anywhere from June to end of September or October, start of October, we would do that. Next year, I'm just thinking about what I should be writing on the board. So we would go United Kingdom first, probably.
Well, first, why don't we say, put the event website up.
So to learn more about what we're going to do, all events once they're scheduled would be published at event.divinetruth.com, which is probably where you booked for this event.
And also your blog.
Yeah, and to keep up to date with what we're doing, and how those plans are panning out that I just mentioned, mary.divinetruth.com. And on that site, mary.divinetruth.com, if you subscribe, you get an email each time I publish something. And I try to put updates about what we're doing when we're not doing events there as well. And you will also receive notification once we schedule any new events anywhere in the world on that site.
Is mary.divinetruth.com different from Notes Along the Way?
No, same.
Okay.
It's just yeah, that's the site. It's just hosted now by divinetruth.com. Yeah. So, yeah, that would be our plan. Any questions about that? No? As Jesus was saying earlier, we would have to find venues and accommodation in each of those locations, which after having done that for this trip seems like much less for me because it's only 4 times that, not 15 times that, which is what we had to do for this trip. So it took us collectively really about 6 or 8 months before we came on this trip, because Jesus researched and then ordered and purchased our whole new sound setup, which is not here because of the customs delay, but to make sure we had a very streamlined yet very effective audio setup for recording, and so you could hear well while you're here, but also so we had good audio recordings after the fact. So he spent a lot of time on that, and then he got it all into cases, and it's really good. And then I worked on the scheduling and the booking for this event, and we both made decisions about the venues and locations and accommodation, and that took us a long time actually. I think it will go easier next time because I've learned a lot and I know exactly what's going to work and what's not, and also we'll try to simplify our time as well. The issue with this trip is that we haven't had a lot of time for ourselves in any regard, and that's not sustainable. We can't do that every year where you have 4 months out of the year just sort of doing physical things. Yeah, so that's our idea, and as I said, UK, Portugal probably in the Porto area of Portugal, and then Canada probably in Nova Scotia, and in the US probably in this region. And then home.
Are you open to us sending you recommendations or just?
Yeah, I'm open.
Okay.
Yeah. I would love that. I'll put together some criteria of what we would want. And yeah, anyone who knows of anywhere or who wants to look, I'd welcome that.
Yeah, I'd love to volunteer.
Yeah, thank you. All right, if you shoot me an email at mary@divinetruth.com, so yeah, or actually probably to event@divinetruth.com is better.
Yeah, it's better there.
Yeah, because then it's all in one place for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
The place in Nova Scotia, do you have to pay any money for the venue?
We have to pay money with every venue.
Apart from this one,
Apart from
yeah,
this
yeah, and the one in
And one in
Portugal.
Portugal we were using last time, but it's not big enough.
Yeah.
So the next events, all of the next ones we'll have to pay for.
The one we had in Nova Scotia last time was very inexpensive, but it was also very unsuitable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
And also not, a lot of them we don't want to put wait lists up, because if you have a wait list then you've got to manage the wait list, but also it means that people who are on the wait list can't plan. So what we want to do is make sure the event venue is big enough to potentially contain everybody who might want to come. And so that means usually paying a lot more for the venue than we end up needing, but at the end of the day it's also simpler for everybody because it means everybody can make plans. So at the moment there's people who missed out because of being on a wait list, and unfortunately in some places almost 25% of people didn't come, and so unfortunately that meant that there are other people on those wait lists that couldn't come too, you know, because we didn't have enough space for them.
So in future, we want to be able to just fit everybody in. Anyone who registers, I want to find a space where anyone, and then if 30% of people don't come, that's okay, but it means that people who were waitlisted didn't miss out because those 30% of people didn't come. So yeah.
And also the sustainability of that depends on donations for us, because every event we're trying to make free for everybody, but if obviously we don't receive enough donations to cover the costs that we have, then we can't do it again. It's a sort of, so it sort of gets down to that as well. Yeah.
Which is why, you know, ultimately we'd love to have venues that are God's way venues in each of these places, because then you don't have ongoing expenses apart from our travel. Marina?
Yeah, just for the people that do want to volunteer, aside from the size of the location, what makes a venue suitable?
Yeah, I will put together something so people who want to help can contact me and I'll send it to you.
Can we list a few things though, because it might be helpful for anybody who watches this video.
Yeah, all right, let's do it.
Because a lot of people make suggestions to us, but
yeah, true.
most of the time we can just dismiss them out of hand. You know what I mean? Because they haven't thought about it very well. So it's important that,
yeah, it's a good idea.
You know,
and it will save a lot of revenue.
yeah, a lot of people make suggestions that they think are good, but they haven't considered a lot of factors. You know.
So we're going to call this venue requirements.
So we'll look at some basic things we consider when we're looking at a venue. So the very first thing we consider is we need a space that's big enough to allow for all the people who want to come. So let's say in the States, for example, this trip we had 320 people registered for the state events. So if we have one event, then it's potentially 300 people might come. So it's going to have to be quite a large venue. If it's quite a large venue, the second thing we'll look at, so that's size.
Size, and just as a general rule, we allow 1 square metre per person. I know you.
Which is 10 square feet.
10 square feet per
Per
person.
person.
So if you're looking at the size of a venue, that helps you to know, well, if we're looking for 150 people, it's going to be, can you do that maths for me? What was that? What was
1,500 square feet.
1,500 square feet we need at a minimum, yeah. So, yep. So what was it, 10 square feet?
Yeah, 10 square feet per person, or 1 square metre per person. The trouble with bigger venues too is that we need to have a stage, because otherwise the people at the back can't see you at all, can't see your whiteboard, can't see what you're writing on.
Once you get over 100
Once you get over about 100 people, you need a stage. About 120 people you can get away with.
Can I ask what you mean by stage? Just a riser or something?
Well, it's going to either have to be something we bring in and can hire, or something that's already there.
At least this size.
And if you think about if you went to see, say, a play or something, and you're sitting down there, how high would you need it? So the bigger the venue, obviously, the bigger the stage is going to have to be. So anywhere up to 4 feet, with 300 people, you might need 4 feet high stage. But with a 200 people, you might only need a 2 feet high stage. You know.
2 to 4 feet.
Now, of course, if there's a venue that's got a sloped audience, then that obviously negates the need for the stage. Yeah. So you could have us down the bottom and like a lecture theatre or something like that, where everybody's up, and then obviously they can still sit.
Would you consider a party tent? You know, some wedding tents?
No,
we'll talk
so
about
let's
why.
talk about why in a minute. But bathrooms is the next consideration.
Bathrooms is the next. So fundamentally, you need to allow for every person who's at the event to go to the toilet within 10 minutes.
For the break length. So
Because otherwise, if there's, let's say there's only 5 toilets and there's 200 people, and the average person takes a minute to go to the toilet, right? So you divide the 5 toilets, so it's basically, there's 5 people a minute, right? But there's 200 people. Now you can see it's going to take 20 to 40 minutes for everyone to go to the toilet, right? Now, that's, for us, not suitable. Right? We need enough toilets where everybody can go. You can see, in some of the venues this time we've had to wait long times for people just to go to the toilet. We prefer not to do that because then we can get going again quickly. People go to the toilet, come back, and we can get going again quickly. So you need enough toilets. It's
Adequate for quick breaks.
adequate facilities, yeah. Now you can see with the tent idea, that is an issue
Well,
with
it's
the
for
tent.
the commons.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
see, most people don't understand how much the hire costs are. So if you ask Jane, how much a hire costs for one weekend for 2 toilets? In the US, this is.
500 for one weekend.
Yeah,
500.
fine. So now if we needed to hire like 8 of them, or 12 of them, can you see that's probably going to cost more than a venue? And you end up with a lot of impracticalities. How much did the chairs cost to hire?
700
700
for 2 weeks.
for 2 weeks. Now, so if you add the chair cost and the porta potty cost and
A venue,
A venue.
and
the tent and the setup of the tent and the dismantling of the tent and the time taken to do all of that, and then you compare that with a venue, you always end up better in a venue.
You cannot also, talk about tents. The issue is the weather. So it can be very hot in a tent, or if it rains, the
Or
sound quality is just gone.
Yeah,
because
'cause you hear all the
or you hear that.
noise.
And also because we have electronics that need to be in the tent, it needs to be very weatherproof. And so tents
Tents don't work.
problematic.
Just not,
You
don't
get a
work at
leak
all.
on a cable and
Yeah,
it's a
and
big
you're done.
hazard.
Yeah.
You can electrocute someone or blow something up.
Yeah.
It's not like, I know weddings and stuff do that, but it's a very different environment.
And it's only for a half a day
It's
or a
just
day.
for, 5 or 6 hours on a single day.
Yeah.
And also anyone can use the bathroom at any time during a wedding. There's just speeches and music. It's not like people need to sit and attend. And you know what it's like when you're sitting here, there's so much pressure to tune out, which is why another consideration we have is seating.
They have to be comfortable. Because if they're hard, so we got to the event in Canada and every seat was hard, you wouldn't be able to sit on it for 20 minutes. So everybody had to bring cushions and pillows and
From their
blankets
homes and
from their
stuff.
homes and everything. It gets very impractical if there's 200 people having to do that, right?
Yeah.
So have to
So
be comfortable.
must be comfortable seats.
Because otherwise people start thinking with their bottom rather than their mind. Because the pain that you feel sitting on the chair gets to you in the end. Yeah.
And so there are other things relating to that we consider is the temperature. The comfort of the participant is high on our list of.
We had one event in Australia where it was 3 degrees the entire time in the venue.
2014 assistance group. It was freezing.
It was terrible.
Everyone was sitting there. We had heaters, beanies. Everyone.
So it was 3 degrees Celsius, which is what about Fahrenheit? That must be about 35 or something, or 36 or something. Yeah, it was cold. And,
Temperature, also lighting. We think about.
Yeah.
How well can you see us?
Yeah.
And also that if it's being filmed, that has an impact as well.
Yeah.
But really, you want to be able to see our expressions and
There must be enough power points around the edges for us to connect our electricity.
Power outlets.
Yeah.
So these are all the things that we had to look at remotely from Australia for every venue of the 15
Hundreds
venues.
of venues, hundreds.
We've settled on
We said it on 15 or whatever, but
14.
we looked at hundreds.
So electricity, power outlets, lighting, temperature, seating, all these things are important. There was something else that I
Car parking.
Car parking. Or transport.
You can see here, because there wasn't the appropriate car park facilities, arrangements had to be made to transport you back and forward. Now, when you've got 200 people, that's completely impractical.
Yeah.
So there needs to be enough parks for everybody to park.
Access to airports, other transportation means if we're just having one big event in each country, people are going to want to come from all over.
Yeah.
So it needs to sort of be in a hub where it's not unreasonable. People don't have to hire a car or a bicycle or whatever to make their way there.
Yeah.
So access and accommodation.
There must be plenty of accommodation for those people, yes. So it's no good going into the middle of nowhere. In Portugal, we sort of went into the middle of nowhere, and there was no accommodation for anybody really, you know. And so they were oftentimes staying like 20, 30 kilometres away, 40 kilometres away, and of course having to get a car to drive them, and this all adds to your cost then, you know. So it's not very helpful.
And Jesus and Mary coming.
Yeah, they have to be open to Jesus and Mary presenting.
Yeah, so that's a big thing. You know, like I said, in some countries, in particular in Belgium, we had knockbacks of like 50 or 60 venues just on that issue.
I wonder why there.
A lot of Catholic history, a lot of business history as well, and the spirits who were behind it didn't want us there.
There's also what I noticed when I was dealing with venues in Holland, Belgium, those two in particular, there's a very worry about extremism, extremist groups, and not supporting extremism, and so there was sort of some kind of mention of that in the knockbacks. Someone had a hand up.
How do you consider the time frame for access? Like how far from an airport?
Yes, that's, what do we consider?
Yeah.
Well, so here we feel we're close enough to a major airport that has international and domestic. So what are we, from half an hour from an airport here?
Half an hour.
Yeah.
Mind you, if it depends a bit on the transport too, doesn't it? So if there's regular shuttles or regular buses, then of course you can be further away and get away with that. If there's accommodation locally, you can sort of get away with being further away. We like venues that are further away from a city, but at the end of the day, practicality-wise, a lot of times it's not very practical.
But if say people can access an airport and then there's an easy bus or an easy train to where they're going to stay and see the event, then we quite like that, because it usually means you're outside of a city. The environment for listening to truth is nicer.
You can always contact school bus companies and ask and rent them
Well,
for the day.
this is the thing.
We don't want anybody contacting anyone on our behalf.
Yes, so that would fall
There's
to
a
us.
whole lot of problems with that.
Yes, and so then that's just an extra logistic that we have to manage. So we try to streamline the logistics as much as possible to make it, as Maria said earlier, sustainable, that we can keep doing it. The issue with other people acting on our behalf is that
frequently they're not as loving as we are.
Yeah, or they feel like, I just meet people's addictions, that's how I get things done.
Yeah.
And that is completely the opposit of how we operate, you know. We're very
So when you set up an addiction with a venue, when we come along, they expect us to live in the same addiction, and we don't, and then they get all upset about that.
We're very respectful, we're very clean, we look after the venues. We've had that feedback from a number of venues on this trip. Wow, you've left it cleaner than when we gave it to you. And I always say that's our policy. That's how we operate in God's way as well. Leave an environment or a tool or anything better than when you found it. And we're very direct and honest about what we need, and we don't believe that we should meet addictions in that process, because that just sets up problems, really.
Well, it
It's
sets up
going
a lot
against God's
of
laws.
it also sets up a lot of things where people think they can get away with a lot of things with us because we've been way too tolerant of their bad behaviour in a venue. So let's say we hire a venue, but the venue acts badly towards us in the sense that they say they're going to provide 10 toilets, but 5 of them are inoperational when we arrive,
Which has happened.
That obviously doesn't work for us, you know, and you've got to have it out with the venue about that. And when you start trying to, these venues often get very upset with you about it. And so it's far better that we sort all of that out up front, you know.
And sometimes, you know, when people want to interact with a venue about, say, the issue of the toilets, their idea is just to be to put the needs of the participants down, rather than say, no, this is what we need. We need this. They're trying to please the venue rather than care for the participants. So it requires some development in love to deal with things correctly.
Yeah, and firmness too at times.
Well, love is very firm, isn't it?
Yeah.
Another consideration we have is for the sound.
Yeah.
Now, in this venue, the sound has actually been quite nice because there's some soft furnishings. Do we call that? There's boards and things around that absorb sound. But sometimes when we get into old town halls that have big timber floors and timber walls, the sound reverberates everywhere. It's quite difficult for you guys to attend to, and we get feedback through the speakers. So in terms of the sound, carpeting or soft furnishings, can we call it that, are helpful.
Yeah.
In Portugal this time, we had a lovely yurt that had wool in the walls, and it was lovely from that perspective, but the floor was timber and it creaked, and if you've listened to any of those recordings you hear the creaking. So it's a great demonstration of why we look at these things. We didn't know that before we arrived, and it was too late, we couldn't find any way to change. Well, that was where we tried to change, to go to the Buddhist, or the, I don't think it's technically Buddhist, but the meditation retreat.
We were invited to go there.
Yeah.
But after visiting there, we knew the spirits there would oppose us anyway. So
yeah, so we decided
so that's another thing we consider too.
Yeah, is the spiritual atmosphere
oppositional?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So spiritual atmosphere.
So oftentimes a New Age atmosphere is oppositional to what we teach.
Yeah.
Obviously, some people have tried to book us into like a Catholic church venue or whatever. They always knock us back, so that's a pointless exercise.
Yeah, but some places do definitely have a lot of spirits that sort of reside there because they're used to hooking into the people that come there.
Mm-hmm.
But then when we get in that environment, it's quite turbulent for the spirits and you because there's all these sort of spiritual
influences that you not normally would have, you know. Yeah. So you're not used to them.
So when you're looking for a venue, you don't necessarily have to assess that, but you can know that we will assess it, and it might be a reason why we knock back the option.
So you said religious New Agey. So what sort of places are likely to have less spirit? Because obviously
usually business places, commercial
places,
and less likely. Mostly because the spirits are not interested in those places on a regular basis, you know. They only rock up when people rock up. Sort of.
You know, when you have a meditation centre or something, you actually have a group of people coming there every day or every week, opening themselves up to spirits. So spirits are like, yes, this is the place to hang. There's people coming here all the time. Same in churches, that kind of thing.
So like more ideal places be like smaller theaters and auditoriums.
Yeah,
kind of
great.
like that.
Yeah.
As long as they're open to Jesus and Mary.
Yeah. The other thing they need to be open to is the potential of media attention, which is a tricky thing because many are not. Like they worry that their venue will be attacked by the media for letting us be there. And so
this is a very real thing. That was another thing I found in Europe, that a lot of them stipulated you can rent here, but you cannot even put up a sign with an arrow to direct your participants to the room. There can be nothing that says
Divine Truth
rented
Centre.
to Divine Truth because of these fears that, you know, I guess it's cancel culture or something. People are very sensitive about a media campaign being
launched against their venue.
Yeah.
You know, and that's happened in the past where people have been condemned for letting us use a venue.
I liked the guy in Australia. He had people ringing up saying, "How can you rent to Jesus and Mary? You know, these terrible people." And he said, "Are you calling Woolworths? Because I know that they just went down there and shot a bully." So he wasn't phased.
Yeah, he wasn't phased.
What sort of venues did you use in Philadelphia and Texas? What kind of venues were those?
Hotels.
Yeah.
Hotels.
Okay.
They're too small though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one we had in Philly was nice. It had that.
It did have a raised thing. It was about 100
Okay.
people,
Yeah.
but not big enough for the next events.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had if we could find the one that we could book every year, it'd be great, because you could just, you know, book that same one every year and it'd be fantastic. But at this stage, we haven't found one that's sort of suitable every year, you know.
Okay. And the other thing, you know, what we would love is to be able to, so this is like a large venue requirement. We'd also love to be able to find accommodation where Jesus and I stay for a month, and we have an area similar to this
Similar
size.
to this.
So what's the dimensions of this space again, Jane? I can't remember.
25 by 30, I think.
Yeah.
25 by 30 feet. So
20
about 10
feet.
metres by 8 metres.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
You know, it's not unheard of in the US to have like a living dining area that is open plan, that kind of takes in that amount of space. If we had that, then we don't have to have additional expenses if we decide to run smaller groups. We can just have it in our accommodation, which we have to pay for anyway. So that's also what we're looking for in each location.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a bit harder in Europe because everything's a bit more. Yeah.
3/4 size everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you looking in North Carolina specifically?
Yeah.
Okay, just in North Carolina.
Or Tennessee.
This region.
Eastern Tennessee or Western North Carolina is fine as well. Yeah. So, or here, Raleigh, Durham. Anywhere from here really across to say Knoxville or Tennessee or something like that.
Yeah. So we know there's possibly potentials in your location, but we have decided next year we're just going to focus on here, because ultimately in the future we would love to have a learning centre in this region if there's enough people.
We've had our eye on North Carolina, Tennessee for a learning centre ever since I can remember. So it's where we feel is the best suited location for a potential centre in the future. So one of the advantages of being here for a few years at least is that Mary and I get to visit the place, we get to see, we get to have a look around, we can start looking around at like potential areas. Our spirit friends can give us some inspiration about those areas, and you know, we can do a little road trip about some of those areas in the longer run. So it's about planning for the future as well as, you know, running events. Yeah.
Please may you just write on the board open to media because we're very tired.
You and Mum get a bit bossy with me, can I just say that? You often tell us what we need to be doing.
Yeah. Media.
Let's just write media. Another thing is access. Some of you last weekend would have seen Joe, who came in a wheelchair. Obviously having stairs and things is not
difficult.
It's difficult for someone. So just access. So like some venues, there's been a very narrow staircase up to a room up the top somewhere, and obviously the room's fine, but the staircase means that one person can walk up and down at a time, or two people up and down at a time, and you've got 60 people coming in. It's like, it takes forever just to go up to the stairs and down the stairs, you know. Yeah, so it's
not
easy
practical.
Access for able-bodied people, but also with the narrow staircase and stuff, that's a problem. But and then for people who might not be in a wheelchair, but maybe they're not
infirm.
Yeah, they're infirm. They've got some problems with mobility. So. Okay. Yes.
How about Canada? Are you want to stay in Halifax?
We're still
Nova
undecided.
Scotia.
Yeah, we're thinking Halifax, or there is a university town in Nova Scotia which is about an hour from Halifax that does have regular public transport going to it. I think. Sorry.
Dartmouth?
No, it's called
Wolfville.
Wolfville. Wolfville.
Yep.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a university town. It's got university theatres. So we're looking there as well, but it'll take time for us to sort out.
And I think
one way or the other.
New Brunswick, we've decided no, haven't we?
At the moment, yeah, we've decided against New Brunswick because it's just harder to get to. Even Halifax is relatively hard to get to for most people. So to get to Halifax is a 2-flight thing from here. Generally, you've got to go to Toronto and then across to Halifax or something like that. And we came Philly, Halifax, Philly to here. So there is you can actually, I found you have a new airway called Breeze, I think it's called, and they do some direct flights from Portland, Maine, which is only like a 6-hour drive from where we would have the venue. But again, you've got to drive it, and you know. So we're trying to try to minimise everybody's need for a hire car and all those other things. So we're trying to work it out as to what's the best, but there's also reasons why we want to be in Nova Scotia, because that's also where we would like to see a learning centre in the future. So
yeah, so Canada, Halifax will fill that kind of region, USA, North Carolina, Tennessee, Portugal in the Porto region we're thinking, and UK we're a bit...
We're thinking
Cotswolds.
west of London.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's called the Cotswolds or something like that. Yeah.
But we're pretty open. Certainly.
Yeah.
What about price or overall budget or price?
Oh
per
yes,
person?
good point.
Good point, yes. Obviously, everything's done by donation, so we've got to consider what is reasonable for the average person in that country to donate towards a venue, for example. Because, you know, like in Brussels, they were asking $11,000 for a 50-seat venue, 11,000 euros.
They have a lot of diplomatic and business trade there, so they...
Yeah, so, you know, and that was per day. So one venue would have cost us 33,000 euros. That's obviously way out of what's possible.
Yeah.
Donations we received in Brussels for the whole 3 days were 1,500 euros. So we ended up paying 3,200 Australian, which is about 2,600 euros for the venue, and we lost. We didn't get enough donations to cover that venue even. So we've got to consider per person sort of cost. So what we've done is we sort of averaged it out at 10 to 15 of the denomination of the
local
country we're
currency.
in. So $10 to $15 US dollars per person per day is probably doable. But when you get up to like $50 per person per day, you know, we don't get that much donations, to be honest. So
per seat per day, 10 to 15
10 to
of the local
15
currency
is often we can cover that.
kind of how we ballpark.
Follow-up question with that, would it be like an addictive thing or a truth-based thing to have like transparency and like what were the costs, so people could see that and then understand?
Well, we would rather that people donate because they want to, rather than feeling like, oh, this has cost us so much. So the general way we work is that we just say, we're coming to that event, we pay for it up front, and then if we get enough donations to cover that event, then we look at coming again. But if we can't get enough donations to cover that event, then it's unlikely we can come again, because we know the next time we're not going to cover the event either. And then, of course, that means that Mary and I get to the point where we have no money at all then. So, but we don't tell anybody what the costs of the event generally were, because we sort of feel that it needs to be motivated from people's hearts as to what they give.
Certainly we're open about it, but we feel like if you get into this thing of...
you know, doing like an accounting session at the end of every event saying this is how much your seat cost us and this is how much, you know, this cost us and that cost us. If we do all of that, it you know, in the end it makes you feel guilty.
Yeah, or obligated.
Or obligated.
Something. We do want this to be a gift, you know.
So we don't want to obligate anybody.
This is just info if you want to help us find something, you know what we think about.
Yeah.
Have you looked into movie theaters, or is that like not?
No.
We haven't.
I know they rent them for business meetings.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Of course, in some countries they don't, and some they do. So we don't necessarily know what the setup is in each country either. But a movie theatre would probably work, depending on their lighting. If it was too dark, a lot of their.
Because often, you know, they might like us, but we want to see you and your hands up and your that sort of thing. So that would just be a lighting consideration, which we have.
Aside from that, yes, we'd definitely consider it.
Jerome?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, the cities that you mentioned and then how you wanted to build learning centers there specifically.
Yeah.
Just curious, like, because like say for instance when we're talking about Halifax and Wolfville, what if we could, like, say for instance Daniela and I or whoever else, if we find a venue that meets all those requirements, you know, I'm like, oh, well, like, what about this place? Like, what about another city, another province, right?
Well, we have long-term goals in each place as well as short-term goals, and one of the long-term goals we have for Canada, for example, is that we would like to have a couple of thousand acres of land in the area in the middle of South Nova Scotia, and where we can actually do a proper centre, like a proper learning centre, which is self-sufficient in the long term. So one of the advantages of us going there now is that we get to see the locations, we get to visit some places, we get the feel of the place, we get to get to investigate how much land costs and other things like that over the next few years. And so we get the feel of what's going to be involved in that location. And now, if it turns out that after getting the feel, we feel that it's probably not going to work, then we start looking for another location. But we have, from the spirit world before we came to Earth, already picked out certain locations.
Really?
Yeah. And so we're firstly trying to concentrate on those locations for lots of different reasons.
The other thing, you know, if we sort of have these regions where we come to each year, if you don't live in that region, you do, but you want to come each year, you also get to know where you're going to go and how you're going to get there and where you're going to stay, and it sort of makes it sort of easy that way. Also, down the track, if we do happen, or somebody happens to acquire land that we can make into a learning centre, the other opportunity, if we have the events in that region, is that there's the potential that we have like humility and practice days before and after our events, which gives you, is what we do in Australia as well, it gives you the opportunity to come and participate in the creation of a centre, basic infrastructure or environmental regen on the land, but you also get feedback on where you're at with the principles that we're teaching in practice. So having the events in these locations that we see sort of a vision for in the future has a lot of kind of flow-on benefits.
We prefer to choose for our long-term locations land that's been quite destroyed and quite decimated by farming or by, we like to see them in farming or communities generally for lots of different reasons. Some of them to do with approvals from government, some of them to do with other reasons. And what we find is that we can also illustrate best how to recover damaged land and how fast that can happen when you've got the most damaged land you can possibly get. So we're not adverse to getting damaged land. I've actually looked in places like Arizona and other places before, but the difficulties are with many places is they don't meet all criteria. So places like Arizona, for example, is going to be very prone in the future to volcanic and earthquake activity, for example. And so that doesn't really meet my long-term criteria. So there are times when we look at certain criteria. Obviously, we don't want to drill bores or anything like that. We want to harvest water from the sky instead of drill bores and other things like that for lots of reasons, lots of loving reasons. And so the country or the location needs to allow us to do that as well. There's a lot of consideration of water supply, food source, because in the end we want these centres to be self-sufficient.
And to demonstrate sort of loving farming principles.
So drilling a well is not loving, you're saying?
Not really, no. It's, obviously, particularly when you consider en masse how much everybody's doing it. So what we're finding in Australia with all of the wells, and it's happening here in the US too now, as I mentioned earlier, is that people are finding the wells are drying up. They're getting deeper and deeper and deeper and eventually drying up altogether. And in our farming community in Australia, the reason why is because people have pumped so much water out of them, and the water isn't getting back into the system because it's being used by the farming process, particularly for cattle. And it's getting used over and over again, and therefore, it's not going back into the ground. And as a result of that, less and less water is filtering down through the system. And that creates all sorts of long-term problems for hundreds of years in time, And so our preference is to be able to harvest the water.
The way we see it is, if you're harvesting the water, you're collecting it, and then the way that you use that water should also keep it going in the system into the ground, which grows things, which then creates micro and macro atmosphere to create more, you know.
So we've already experimented with all that in Australia, and it works really, really
with
well.
Our wastewater and our septic and all of those things to just keep that cycle happening, rather than just drawing. We want to sort of just stay in that cycle, I suppose.
Yeah, so in Australia we've done some recovery of some land, for example, where before it was just bare dirt, and had been bare dirt for 12 years and nothing growing on it at all, and then now there's like 6 to 10 metre high trees on it, and it only took 6 years for that to occur. And now inside of that land, when you walk through it, instead of the temperature on the ground being 75 degrees centigrade, which is like 150 or thereabouts, I think, Fahrenheit or more, the temperature on the ground is where you can grow things, you know, so it's only 20 something centigrade. And whereas before, when it was bare dirt, the ground itself was baking to a level of about 4 inches deep, so nothing could really grow on it. And so we've done a lot of experiments and a lot of and gathered a lot of, you could say, technical knowledge about all of these things. And so what we want to do is make sure that we do bring some kind of improvement to the place we choose, rather than destruction to the place we choose.
If you want to learn more about some of those projects that we've been doing with environmental regeneration, water harvesting and stuff, godsway.net is where you'll find a lot of detail about those projects.
Can I add something to what you're saying with regenerating the land? So there's this YouTube video that I watched, and I'm not sure if, I know to a smaller extent that's what you guys are already doing, but there's this one YouTube video where I watched where they said that we took all this orange waste, I guess they were like maybe juiced oranges or something, and then trucked it into a barren wasteland, dumped it, and just left it there for years, and wanted to go back to see what would happen, and so much life like flourished.
That's right. We've done that.
The local fruit
and veg stores, we took all their waste for nearly 8 years.
And just
dumped
buried it, laid it around, So there's lots of things we've tried, lots of things that and lots of things that you can be involved in. Okay, Dawson.
I know in the future I think I saw in another video the plan was to have other like Divine Truth members in a condition to run those. Based on like what you guys have seen with everybody's condition, how far do you think that is from having people?
10 to 15 years.
It's largely up to you.
Yeah.
You know,
it took us 8 years in Australia with some very sincere people to get them ready to where there were 3 directors who we could trust to run God's Way while we're away. It's going to take a while. Your soul condition takes time to change, you know, and as you've realised hopefully from this seminar, it's a pretty it's going to be a bit of a drawn out process, unfortunately, and of course the more you draw it out, the longer it gets. But some people we find are quite sincere, so that we've had some people in Australia who've been quite sincere, and it hasn't taken them a huge amount of time. But when I say a huge amount, it took them 4 or 5 years to get to the stage where we could begin the process of working on a centre. But it required another 8 years of Mary and my time with them every week. To get them to the stage where they were ready to actually run the centre.
For us to come on this trip, if you like.
So the reason why we haven't come on trips up until now is because that's what we've been doing, trying to get one centre up. You know, and you're working with the condition of people, and you can't control their condition either. So it has to be a sincere growth on their part. But obviously we'd like to give you guys exactly the same opportunities as that. But now that we've got a little team over there, they are trying to find other people that they can educate. And so they're hoping now, so our next part of this process is them getting to the stage where they find a replacement for themselves. And then they will follow us when we travel, and they will stay behind us for maybe 3 months.
And help set up a centre and help do what we've done with them with with whoever wants to set up a centre.
Yeah.
So they're very passionate about that.
Yeah.
Eloisa and Phoebe, the two of the directors, are very passionate about doing that. And already like dreaming to come and just even run a couple of days after a seminar like this to help you guys implement things.
They're even thinking initially of maybe finding some land that one of you owns or something and just running a couple of environmental days on it or something like that, just to give you a bit of a taste of it, like, so you know.
And then I know also you were thinking about the idea of like live streaming. I know at one point, is that still something you think about? Are there issues with that?
We find it very ineffective. There's a lot of things we find very ineffective, and videos we find very ineffective, because what we're finding is that people watch our videos and then they get in their head that they understand. And yet we know in their heart they got no understanding at all, but they think they do. So now the next time we come and visit those people, they're in a more stronger state of arrogance than they were before, and it actually makes the next visit harder for us to try to break down that arrogance and break down the resistance that they have. And so we're finding, we think that books in the future will probably be more effective in the sense that people can sit, read, ponder, reflect, they can be inspired. So Mary and I would prefer to do that, but of course to do that we need a lot more time. So at this stage we're focusing on what we can do, which is this sort of regular visits, and we're hoping that in time that there'll be certain people in these locations who will develop enough understanding of the path themselves where we can refer other people to them for help. But the people who are going to be the helpers need to be very mindful of their love of self as well, because people have a lot of demands on you, and if you don't love yourself, when you do something for free, it increases the demands generally tenfold, you know what I mean?
Is there a certain sphere condition that you kind of have as a point where you that trust, is it like a third sphere?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah. It has to be close to the third sphere, otherwise the person can't handle the position or the responsibility in a manner that's loving and humble. Yeah.
Something to inspire too.
The site to donate is a donate.donate?
Yeah, so if you want to donate to Mary and I specifically and to the events, that's donate.divinetruth.com. And if you want to donate to God's Way stuff, because God's Way, God's Way, to give you an illustration of the scale of God's Way in Australia, they own around $2 million worth of property at this point. They own a bulldozer, an excavator, a tractor, a trailer, and they own, they're trying to sell one property at the moment to raise funds to build a building, to build an event centre, one of the first that we would want to build, and they're going to sell one of the properties in order to try to raise those funds. But at the moment they own about 1,000 acres of land as well. And you can imagine all of that is very expensive to keep going. And so they're very reliant on people's donations from all around the world. And a lot of times it's like a few people donating a lot of funds rather than many people donating a little bit.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are listening to Divine Truth, but on the average, about 1% of people donate on the average. So, so if you think about if everybody donated, then automatically, everyone would have to donate less. You know what I mean? So, but we can't control all of that. So there is this. So I think it's on the godsway.net website.
Yep.
There is a donate page.
There is. I think it's /donate, but I'm hesitant to write that because it might be wrong.
But also, at the moment, every director in God's Way is not paid. Nobody's paid.
Nobody's paid.
So no volunteers are paid, no directors are paid, but the directors work full time for God's Way. And so the question would become then, how do they do that? Well, what they do is there is a link on those pages to their own donate pages, So you can donate to those directors just to help them live. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's also, they live the same way Mary and I live. They don't work in the sense of 9 to 5 jobs. They work more than 9 to 5. At the moment, they're working like 10-hour days.
If you go to the blog,
you'll see how much work they're doing.
Update
And they do that for free to God's Way, and they rely on and trust on donations to live.
Yeah.
A few places that I donate to, they have like a reoccurring payment.
Yep.
I've noticed on your site that you guys don't have that. Is that like a technical reason?
Well, in Wise, if you register a Wise account, there is recurring payments available there.
Okay.
There's, I think now on our site with regard to credit cards, there might be some recurring payments too. But generally, we prefer to see people desire something and then do it. Not, oh, I've done it now and I forget about it type of thing. It's sort of, but there is the ability
there is
to do
in Wise, yeah.
In Wise.
If you're using, so we've got a US bank account in Wise.
Yeah, and you can donate.
I think you can set up a recurring in that.
Yeah.
If you want.
And so we do have a US bank account. So if your bank does recurring transactions, you can do a recurring transaction to that US bank account. And then we transfer funds to US, to Europe, or whatever it is, to where we need it. And we have a Europe bank account, a US bank account, a Canadian bank account, and an Australian bank account, and a UK bank account at the moment.
Yeah. So if that information is at donate.divinetruth.com. And and for updates and donations to God's Way, the organisation, and to God's Way directors, you go to godsway.net. To donate to Divine Truth is donate.divinetruth.com. If you want event info, event.divinetruth.com. Updates and announcements, mary.divinetruth.com. And if you want to help with venues, email event@divinetruth.com. Got it?
We try to separate everything because obviously we get thousands of emails, and when it comes to managing events, obviously when we set up an event time when we're traveling, sometimes we get hundreds and hundreds of emails from all these different venues and everything, and if it comes into our personal accounts, a lot of them just get completely lost in amongst everything else. And so we just had to come up with a way to manage all of this. Bear in mind too that only Mary and I manage these things. So we are stretched when it comes to managing things, as well as doing what we do, right? And at this stage, we haven't found anybody really technically up to speed who also has the right, heart attitude about their sin and other things. So it's the real key problem that we face is not so much donations, but it's more people. Finding the people who want to progress and who want to make changes and are living their life in harmony with what we teach. That's the biggest issue we face at the moment. So, that's probably the biggest area where you can help, is by making those changes, working through your sin, making changes. That's the biggest area, because when you do that, you'll find things will change. And also what we find is that it's so much easier to work with people who have done that. An example of that is for the guys, the 3 directors in Australia, Mary and I have only had, while this entire trip, we've only at this stage had 2 meetings with them. And they've managed everything else really well, even though we've only had 2 meetings with them while we're away. Does that make sense? We have 2 online meetings. We'll have another one maybe tomorrow or the next day. I think it's tomorrow it's scheduled for. And that'll be our last one probably for our whole trip. So we'll only have 3 over a 4-month period because we can trust them that much to do the loving thing. Does that make sense? And it also means that when we have a meeting, it's very concise, like we get to issue, dealt with. And because they have some soul-based understanding of truths when it comes to helping other people what they're asking questions about, they grasp what we're saying to them very rapidly compared to a person who wouldn't have those feelings, And so, yes, your progress makes a huge difference in terms of how much you can actually help. Yeah.
And on that note, because I've mentioned this in a couple of other talks, I just wanted to say a little bit more about it. With God's Way, there is regular humility and practice days that happen every week for anyone who wants to be involved in giving the gift to the organisation and to the world. So that's a very important prerequisite, that you want to serve through your participation. You can, anyone from anywhere around the world, as long as they have some understanding of Divine Truth teachings, and that they have the desire that they want to practice those teachings, and they want to give gifts to the world, they are welcome to attend those days. So there's been people from around the world who've already come out and come for a month, come for a couple of months, and
some
longer, some just a couple of days, if even come and been a part of that. So you are welcome to be a part of that if you want to. Anyone listening is welcome, as long as they meet those prerequisites.
We understand, of course, that it's quite pricey to get to Australia and and everything. And there is we are trying to sort of create ways of helping the people who want to come in some way or another, but we've got to be careful of going too far there too, because we end up spending so much money and time doing something for the volunteers and we don't end up getting anything else done. So you've got to be prepared to almost look after yourself.
Yes, make your own arrangements.
Make your own
be
arrangements.
Responsible for yourself.
There are of course times when people get to know you and then they might bill at you, but we're not encouraging people to bill at you without knowing you. Because obviously anybody could rock up, and let's say it's a person who's, a predator, a sexual predator or something, and without getting to know you first, it's unwise for people to bill at you without knowing you. So we're not encouraging people to bill at you or to help you out without first coming to know you. So you're going to have to be prepared to look after yourself at least for a few weeks before people can get to know you.
And also be prepared that you will receive very direct, very personal feedback.
Yeah.
And if you display an attitude that is not a desire to serve and is not humble, you will be asked to leave.
Yeah. As soon as
that's displayed, you're usually given the opportunity to work on that issue and come back.
Yeah. So there's some people who have come for 3 months and they've spent 10 days over 5 minutes a day with us. Over that 3 months, because they got the feedback, they were very angry. No, off you go now. It's not our responsibility to fix your sin. It's your responsibility. And then they come back a day or a week later, no, back home again. and they did that for the whole 3 months and then went home. Obviously they feel quite disappointed, but that's what we do. And you've got to be really prepared to be humble about it.
Yeah, and the important distinction is, in this environment, Jesus and I are attempting to teach you, so we spend a lot of time kind of giving you information, principles, whereas in God's Way, the purpose is to come together to get something done. So it's not all about you getting taught, but you will get feedback if you're working against the goals of the organisation or the principles that we teach.
But we made it very clear to the directors that it's not their responsibility to get you to be more loving.
Yes, yes. This is where your choice and your decisions come into play. How am I going to be? Am I going to be humble? Do I want to love? And
so there's no nursing.
There's no nursing.
There's no mummies.
Mummies get sent home.
Mummies get sent home. People who want to mummy others, nurse others.
Yeah.
No, there's none of that. None of the directors will do that with you.
Yeah. Now, some people find that really beneficial, because it's an opportunity to really not just sit passively, but to actively engage in something and see where they're missing the mark or hitting the mark.
Now, sometimes some of the managers are like 12-year-olds.
Yep.
As well.
We have one manager.
We have one manager who's 12. So if you're 50 and the 12-year-old's telling you what to do, a lot of you are going to find that pretty hard. So you're going to have to be humble enough to do that. A lot of these ones who are 12-year-olds, we feel, are in a better space than most 7-year-olds. That's why they're the manager. So it doesn't matter what age they are, if we feel they're in a better condition and they understand things, understand the principles of truth better, they're allowed to be a manager, And so a lot of times people find that very challenging.
A lot of the managers are women, Some people find that very challenging,
Yeah.
especially because they're directing heavy machinery or they do a lot of stuff.
And a lot of them will know far more than many of you will know, even if you've been in heavy machinery for years. They'll know more. Yeah. And people are not used to that, you know.
Every piece of responsibility given in the organisation is based on sincerity, desire to love and desire to serve, and people who have those things seek knowledge and seek to do the job well in whatever field that job is. So there's a lot of work we're doing in the environment, but also there's a lot of administration that has to happen to meet government requirements of a non-profit and to do the accounting, but also there's a lot that we want to share about what's been happening in the organisation for, you know, how many years now? When did it was 2014? It was 16, 17. A number of years. There's a lot of data about befores and afters, even just sharing that, and we haven't had the chance to do a lot of that good sharing because there's just a very small team of sincere people who are working on just the day-to-days.
Yeah. The part of the issue we face is Mary and I have been teaching on the average 1 to 2 days a week all through the last 7 years as well, and none of that material has found its way up online or anything like that.
I think there's some bootleg recordings out there somewhere on Spotify, I think.
Yeah, but and the reason why that is because we just do not have the time to teach people at the same time as to edit material. And one of the things we try to do with our new recording equipment, which we haven't got here, but is to make it easier for us to get material out faster. But to be frank, it's pretty hard to do everything. So you know, and we're not going to be able to do everything. So after we do this trip, for example, we'll have recordings of most of the trip except for the 2 Chapel Hill events, but we have good recordings of the others. Hopefully next week we'll have a good recording, depending on whether we get our equipment out of customs. But you know, even then, that I do about a day to a day and a half's editing to get the recordings good enough that I feel that they are going to be good enough for the long term, and I do that while we're travelling. So there's a lot of work going on to try to share truth with you, and a lot of people don't understand how much work is going on, obviously, because all you see is the public side of it, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
And Jesus in particular has a very lot of respect for the material that we share. So I know a lot of you are like, oh yeah, just a rando recording is fine. But actually, if you really value what the importance of what we're sharing, you want it to be able to be easily understood by others and easily
and comfortable
engaged.
to listen to.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than in a recording you're listening to things and then there's all this background noise that's annoying, and you know, I don't mind if it's birds or nature, but pretty much anything else, you know, it just interrupts your experience, and so you don't get to concentrate or feel about the experience. And it also makes it harder later when we want to transcribe that material into text. If the recording's not very good, then of course there's a lot more words you've got to fix, and so it just makes everything take longer. So one of the reasons why I'm pretty fussy with our recordings is I'm thinking about not only now but in the future, when people actually want to, you know, or we have the manpower to transfer a lot of this material into text, that it's actually doable, you know, that there's not a lot of words that are masked or missed, and the trouble with the recording like we've got from these events is that many times you're talking while we're talking, and there's a lot, and so it's very, very hard for a person transcribing know what you were saying or what we were saying, and most of the AI that does all this kind of stuff as well won't know either, and so you know, you end up with a lot of errors in it, and that's what we're trying to avoid, because it's the errors that create problems.
I also noticed after we talked the other day, I looked up some of the stuff that's been shared online, and I also noticed that some of you have very strange sort of feelings about us, in that you leave a lot of just blah blah at the beginning in the recordings, we don't do that kind of thing because it's not about us. There's this sort of feeling I feel when I listened and watched some of the stuff. You know, sometimes there's 15 minutes before we start the actual talk. It's just Jesus and I chatting about ourselves or about you guys or about the weather or having a laugh. And there's this feeling that like that's valuable, and that's just like some weird. I find it quite aversive actually, because it's sort of about. It's just about, I don't know what it's. Well, I can describe it, but it would take a while. But it's not the important thing. The important thing is God's truth, you know. So we cut out all that stuff because that's about us. You know, that's not really about God and God's truth. We're not trying to sort of
become celebrities.
Be celebrities, or you know, we don't have this feeling that it's about us, you know. So we approach the way that we share God's truth in quite a different way that I notice than others. Yeah.
So a lot of times when others do recordings at our events, which you're allowed to do at any time,
it's fine. Yeah.
They share it in a manner that we wouldn't share it,
yeah.
and you know. So bear in mind that when you hear something shared, it doesn't mean that we agree with the way it's being shared. Just because we allow permission for people to do recordings, it doesn't mean we agree with what they do with those recordings.
Yeah. And sometimes I don't know, again, because I just hear these things secondhand, but I think some of the things that have ended up on Spotify include personal discussions that were not a part of public presenting, and there's a lot of just lack of consideration for others in that, you know. We're obviously very transparent, Jesus and I, about everything, you know.
But obviously, and also we're happy for you to record everything, every conversation you have
with us.
For your own benefit.
Yeah.
But when you haven't made it clear that you're going to share it all, then obviously whoever else is present in that conversation, you know, they might not like you doing that. Not that we feel that's a problem either, mind you, but you just got to bear that in mind as to what's the loving thing to do. And many of you share with other people things just to correct them. You want us to correct them rather than you have to go through a process with the person to sort them out.
It's sinful motivations that I feel in the sharing is what I'm really getting at. It's some of the principal things that we're talking about when you want to feel special because you had the recording, or you want to correct someone rather than have the discussion with the person.
Or you don't want to have them attack you, so you'd rather them attack us.
You arrogantly think everyone should hear this even if they're not seeking it.
Yeah.
All of these kind of things are your sins that can affect the way that you share.
And also the response to the truth as well. Because quite often in events we're dealing with people's bad experiences from how other people who have heard divine truth are interacting with those people. And quite often we're the ones who bear the brunt of those bad experiences because people think we approve of them, and we don't. We, you know, as you can see from probably this event, I don't approve of very much of your behaviour, even though I love you. I don't approve of very much of your behaviour, and God doesn't either, by the way. And just because we have you at an event, it doesn't mean we approve of everything you do. And if you have that presumption, then you're out of line, really. And this is something you need to bear in mind. That you're a work in progress, right?
We know.
We know that, and we're okay with that. But don't make out to other people that you're not a work in progress.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Any other questions, Jared?
Yeah. So when people volunteer for God's Way, is it done by what people they are excited to help out, or is it kind of like, oh, even if you don't like this, you know, go and do this anyway, you have to work on your emotions. Like, say for instance, if I have
you will be given a task you don't like.
Okay, gotcha.
on purpose.
Yeah, and I'm wondering about that, as an exercise for us to work on.
I mean, nobody sits down and schemes and says, right, Leah's coming, Jaren's coming.
So Jaren doesn't like this, so we're going to give that to her.
No.
It's not like that.
But it's just a natural thing that ends up happening. And one of the first jobs that everyone who comes gets, nobody really likes. It's to do with removal of a certain invasive species, and most
in Australia.
By hand.
By hand.
Most people dislike it, but it's a great way to measure people's sincerity,
Within
their
a day,
thoroughness.
within the day, we sort out your sincerity,
Yeah.
your motivation, your
Yeah.
lack of desire, your inability to follow instructions, your inability to understand why you're doing a thing, your lack of desire to find out why you're doing the thing. We find out within a day almost all of that. Like,
Wow.
yeah. And most people are severely challenged the very first day.
Is it a bug?
Yeah.
It's sorry?
Is it a bug?
No, it's a plant.
It's a plant.
It's a great, there's actually spiritual significance in the task that, you know, there's some stuff on godsway.net about it.
Yeah.
About the
You
spiritual
look up
principles
on
behind it.
godsway.net, Mother of Millions or something like that.
Yeah, if you search Mother of Millions, there's a lovely post that Phoebe put together about why we do it, what you can learn about sin, and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There's a spiritual reason for doing everything, not necessarily a physical one. So when I say that, what I mean is, you know, we don't. A lot of times you'll be given what appears to be a task that is just never ending, and so that you can get to deal with spiritual problems that you face.
Yeah. And see the consequences of sin. You know, often we take these very small actions in our day-to-day life that have ongoing effects for generations, and the Mother of Millions is a bit of a demonstration of that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? How's everyone feeling?
Yeah. It's very interesting when we do things in practice, like every day, compared to just attending a seminar.
Right.
Because a seminar, you can sort of sit there and absorb to a degree and ignore the things you want to ignore, accept the things you want to accept, and then think you're accepting the things you want to accept, but actually misinterpret those things.
Have a snack,
fall asleep,
talk to your neighbour,
spirit influence, whatever.
Yeah.
And you can do all of that and nobody says anything to you about it, right? When you come to a humility and practice day, you'll be said everything about everything.
And you,
So
you
it's
don't have the
completely
option
different.
to be passive, you know, there's something to do.
Yeah. And there's no option to, you know, just sit there and moan about it either, because you get sent home if you do that. It's like, and what it does is it helps illustrate very rapidly to yourself what your condition is, which is the purpose. And we don't do it to harm people, but we do it to help people come to knowledge about their sin as quickly as possible. And the directors don't have the feeling that it's their responsibility to even do that. They just say, you're not following my instructions, go home. And you've then got to work out, well, why weren't you following the instructions? And why did they send you home for not following the instructions? And, you know, why didn't they just educate you a bit more about the instructions? And you've got to work out all of those things, like, for yourself.
Because really, to get anything done on earth, if we actually want to get something done on earth, it requires a bunch of people who want to love and be humble and be truthful all
And
the
they
time.
want to do it themselves.
And so we're trying to build an organisation that is populated with people like that. And so we can't waste time kind of trying to encourage you into that, because then you're not going to develop that sincerity in yourself anyway. So, yeah.
And we must say the purpose of the organisation isn't to create some kind of community living space or anything like that. The purpose of the organisation is to have a location in the world where we can present God's truth and then people can see it in practice.
Yeah.
So it's an education centre.
It's a learning centre.
So it's not like you're coming to live there. You're
No.
coming to learn and then go live it in your life.
That's right. We want people to live in their own lives using the principle that they've learnt, that they've developed, you know, through the practice, you know.
So you should be able to come and learn a set of skills, practical, spiritual and emotional.
And then take them home to where you live and then do that for the next year and see how it goes. You know, that's the purpose. It's because we don't want you to live, we want you to be a part of the world, right? Not separate, but separate to the world in the sense of separate to the sin of the world.
Because that's what the world needs. If the world is going to change, it needs people everywhere, individuals initially, making changes in their life, being open, being loving, being truthful, dealing with their sin, and that's truly inspiring for other people.
Yeah. So currently, with all that property, there's only one person that lives on the property, and that one person is called a caretaker of one property, and that's it. There's no other people. Even the directors don't live on these properties. Right? Now, in the future, they may. Once we get the resources together and so forth, they may. But the purpose of them being there is not so they can live in a community living space.
Gotcha.
It's because they are dedicated towards sharing education with the world, and they need to be close to the centre in order to do that.
So they can sort of don't have to maintain their own property, they can just live and do in that one location.
And a lot of them have actually paid for the properties. So they've gifted the money to buy the properties from their own funds. And then eventually they don't even live on it after that. And eventually they may live on it. It depends on the condition of the individuals and also how much resources we get to actually end up with, like having the people who are educating living on the property. But so in the long run, the people living on these properties will be mostly people who are educating others. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So and some of the others that might live on the property might be people who like grow the food or who like build the building or something like that, you know. But we're not interested in creating like a, you know, like a lot of spiritual groups are, like a community living centre where everybody who wants to avoid the world comes to live in that little centre. It's not for that purpose.
No. If you're gonna love the world.
Yeah. Whether it loves you or not.
I also heard there's no air conditioning.
Air conditioning is not, even though Australia is so hot, it's not a big thing. Not like here in the US anyway. Here, like...
We do have an air conditioner in the place where
the
currently
tech
we
is.
meet, we have it where the tech is, and where we meet is in our home we had to put an air conditioner because the bodies were making the place so hot that nobody could concentrate anymore. So we put an air conditioner in where we meet, which is near in my home at the moment is where we meet. We have a space about half of this space and we squeeze people on the floor and everything. And you would have seen some pictures maybe. And we squeeze them all in. And because it's so, you know, middle of summer in Australia, 40 degrees centigrade, so 110 degrees outside, obviously with all those bodies in one place need a bit of cooling.
But I mean, we really did it for the tech though, didn't we? Like most people in Australia are pretty used to in our
hot,
region, used to being hot, you know.
Yeah.
But you
and like 110 hot for you,
So how many managers are there and about how many people, I guess it would vary, are there working?
There's 3 directors.
And then we've got 2, maybe 3 other managers.
3 members.
Yeah.
In addition to that.
But I mean, the people when you're out working, like you have a
sometimes it's up
task
to
or something.
30
people.
Gotcha.
But there's the maximum of managers would probably be about 6. I don't know. Sometimes we're managers. It just
6 to 8.
Yeah. But the people who are full time, if you like, is Jesus, myself, and the 3 directors.
Yeah.
There's a couple of others who are very engaged, but that's about it.
Not full time.
No, and then on a weekly basis, when Jesus and I are home, there's about 30 people that come one day a week. But
when we're not home, because of their lack of sincerity, there's usually only 6 to 8 or 10 at the most.
So we're here, because obviously when we're there, often there's teaching moments and teaching afternoons and stuff, and so people come for that reason.
Yeah.
So it's really a skeleton crew who's dedicated at the moment.
Yeah.
Did I hear that correctly? So now that you're travelling, there are less people coming to volunteer?
Correct. People are fundamentally selfish. They come to get help, not to give.
Which is we're really trying to work against that in God's way. Yeah.
The ones who are not fundamentally selfish are members of the organisation.
Or volunteer, like
Well, no, the ones who are volunteers still, we still feel there's some selfishness there. Otherwise they'd be members. There's only a total of 8 members? Total? Something like that.
Yeah. We sort of have 3 tiers in God's Way actually. We have members, and then we have people who are sort of designated volunteers. So
who are progressing towards being a member?
They're progressing towards being a member, and then we have participants. So the
Which
30 or so people who come are just participants. Yeah. So I get a bit confused who's a volunteer and who's a member now, but you know, there's a,
Yeah. And the reason why we've done it that way is the members are able to vote as to the direction of the organisation. So we need them to be in a space where they actually are not selfish. Because otherwise what would happen is they'd selfishly vote for selfish things, and that would distort the direction of the organisation. Makes sense? Yeah. So anybody who we feel is selfishly motivated can't be a member. We would in the end like thousands of members, of course. Yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great if we had to hire like a football stadium to have our annual meeting. You know, like that kind of thing. But you know, that's a long way away, right?
but it's exponential too. You know, the more you know, it's not just linear; it's exponential. The more sincere people there are, the more that they impact on people who are developing sincerity and so on. You know.
So a lot of people who are currently participants come because they can feel the benefit of the days, even though they know they're not ready to be a member or a volunteer even yet. They come because they realise, it's benefiting not only themselves but also benefiting a project. You know?
Yeah.
But it's sad that when Mary and I are away, those people don't come. So
they come less,
or they come less. That's an indication of their lack of sincerity in lots of different ways. Yeah. The person who's passionate about doing things God's way is passionate about it 24/7, not 7-1. You know, like 7 hours on one day. You know, they're passionate 24 hours on 7 days of the week. So you know, we observe a lot of behaviour, and sometimes make comments about that behaviour, but definitely do not accept as members people who we feel are going to engage that behaviour. So we might not correct you or anything. We just let you still come and do your work, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be a member until you sort yourself out spiritually. But it's open to anybody. Doesn't matter what age. As we said, there's one member who's 12. He's a volunteer, sorry now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There you go.
Thank you. Say a very big thank you to those of you who donated to us over the weekend. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for being here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no,
So different than those videos that we've been watching for years.
Plus, also what we're trying to do is be more direct with everybody, because you know, we find that there's a lot of misrepresentation of what we teach really through interpretation, and we want to. One of the reasons for the trip actually was that we felt having the trip would mean that we could sort of reset the direction people were taking a bit face to face, rather than just try to. You know, it's impossible doing it via email. You imagine. You know, you've received like 15 hours of instruction. Imagine putting that in an email. Absolutely impossible. Right? And even
interpreting that email.
That's right. Yeah, and the interpretation of what you see is frequently way distorted as well.
And hopefully,
and also you don't get to feel our love for you and our care for you, while at the same time our pointing out direct things. You know, we're not judging you when we point things out, but we're saying very directly to you and firmly to you frequently, no, this is a problem and that is a problem, and these things are going to have to be dealt with sooner or later, and you know, And we're trying to raise examples so that you can sort of see examples, but the examples we've chosen are nowhere near the main problems of that we face, you know, as individuals. So we'd just like to encourage you to focus your attention on the principles that we've taught you over the last 3 days, and try to put those principles into practice in your day-to-day life, because that's where you'll notice how tricky it is. You know, that's where you'll go, oh, I thought I got that, but now that I'm trying to do that, now I'm going, wow, it's pretty hard doing that. Or, you know, I'm finding myself drawn in this way or that way through my sin into, you know, trying to circumnavigate these problems and so forth. And so this is where you need to learn to experiment with the truths in your day-to-day life and put them into practice and see what the results are.
To be honest, I was so excited to come here, but I was so scared you're gonna kick me out of the room. Honestly, that I was I have to like read everything and I have to listen to everything.
You guys have a lot of demands.
Yeah. To be honest with you, if you were coming to our regular days in Australia, like a good 75% of you would have been removed. Right? But we feel that there's we need to have these experiences. And we were also very conscious of the fact that in a lot of ways you're still in the beginning of understanding, and we're very allowing of people who are in the beginning of their understanding to make mistakes, just like God is with you, right? He's very allowing of your mistakes in that regard. He doesn't tolerate them. There's still sins attributed to you, but how there's a difference between you engaging a sin on purpose versus you engaging it like because you didn't really understand or know what was going on, right? So what we generally try to do is the more time we've spent with a group, the more direct and straightforward
the more
we become.
refined things become, because we're trying to just give you the opportunity to hear things and process things and make decisions. If we hit you with everything all at once,
it's too overwhelming.
You couldn't deal with the first thing because there's be a lot of things. I think a lot of you already feel like, oh, it's been a lot of things this weekend.
Glad that's over. Yeah. For 1 year at least.
But I think we both encourage you to be curious learners, experimenters, you know, compassionate with yourself, but not complacent, and not sort of justifying your sin, but not judging it. So these are the skills of the path, if you like. This is part of developing sincerity, is learning those practical things of like, I want to be aware, I want truth. When I get it, I'm gonna feel my panic rather than enter demand. I'm gonna
feel my anger rather than get angry at the person sharing it.
I'm gonna be compassionate but not complacent. I'm gonna be, not judgmental but not
also
justifying.
not letting myself get away with it.
I used to confuse compassion and justification all the time.
Yes,
I thought I was
it's
being
very
compassionate. I was
when you're
not.
justifying.
I was justifying everything.
Yeah, that's right.
My bad behavior and everyone else's bad behavior.
And the beauty of catching up with you personally is we can point that out.
Exactly.
You know, when you're just watching a video, nobody's pointing out your thing. They're just pointing, there's just a general comment, and even in seminars like this, I'm often making general comments, even though those comments might apply to 50 or 70% of you. Many of you think, oh, that didn't apply to me, that didn't apply to me. But when we have the personal interaction, we go, no, that did apply to me. that is a problem. That kind of thing. And also we can start to help address things like your arrogance and your centeredness and these kind of problems that everybody on earth, particularly in Western societies, face about their life and their past and how they've been brought up, and all sorts of issues cause these things, and we can address them with you directly. So that's why we want to continue these events, and that's why we also want to do this again. And as Mary pointed out, we're probably going to do it again starting June-ish, probably next year, through to September-ish next year, and we'll probably spend about 1 month in each location.
Now, and that would make us here like August-ish.
September.
August
We'll be here
in
September.
Canada. September-ish, yeah.
So that's about when we're thinking of coming at this stage, September.
And
Still sort of soon. It's soon enough to avoid all your icy winter flight problems, that you end up with, but sort of not so hot as that when we have a venue that hasn't got aircon or something, that it's not going to be uncomfortable.
I guess like when you were talking about how, because we're new to this, and so you understand, because if you were to point out every single thing, we would be like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Because we were having this discussion, myself with other people, where I said, yeah, the more that you get into divine truth, the more that you hear about feedback, that is that feeling, is this overwhelm, is like, and it makes me, it reminds me of that, there's some quote in the Bible where, I think it was around Noah's time before the flood, and it was describing what humanity was like in their soul condition, where every single thought and feeling was evil.
Yeah.
And at first, when I first read that, before discovering divine truth, I was like, oh my gosh, it must have been terrible. And then now that I'm learning about divine truth and divine love, I'm like, no, that's us right now, isn't it?
Yeah, most people don't understand their addictions are evil.
Yeah.
That fear really is evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Living in fear.
So, there's a lot that we can say about those things, but, hopefully over the coming years, as you make progress, you'll be more desirous of more information, and then as you are, you'll find that information will be, oh wow, oh I didn't understand that before, and it'll help a lot. And this is what the group in Australia has found.
You reach a point in your progress where you love feedback. You just like hungry for it because you know how much it speeds everything up. And you're grateful for it.
Not only that, but you can actually hear what's being said in a group and know which bit applies to you.
Yeah.
So most people hear what's said in a group, think that doesn't apply to me, that didn't apply to me.
And
so
sometimes
for example,
I see people applying it to them, I'm like, no, not you.
But you think about the sin issues. If you think about it, the principles apply to every single sin you have. But see, the average person, they hear the principles and they go, oh, that I didn't understand that, I didn't really get that, and then they want to ask the individual question. And I go, well, why are you asking the individual question? It's because you don't understand the principle and how that applies to your individual question. So that means I need to teach the principles more, not spend all this time on your personal issue, but actually teach the principle more, because if you get the principle in your heart, you go, this is like teaching a man to fish versus just giving them fish, in the sense that now I understand every little area of my life, I can apply these principles and it will work. It'll work every time. And this is where you want to get to have that much confidence that the principles of God's truth, God's way, are going to work in your life every time. Every time. You just need to follow the same principles. So an example of that is, I need to work out where my corrupt faith is. I need to work out where I don't want to love. I need to work out what my version of love is compared to, God's version of love. I need to want the truth, get to the stage where I desire it. What is the truth? I need to find it, discover it. I need to want it. And then I want to be humble enough to be able to do all of that and feel while I do it. And go through the feelings while I do it. Now, if you can do that in your day-to-day life, you will make huge changes in your life within a year. Your whole life can look different within a year. When I started doing this in this life, within 1 year, my whole life looked different. With the family, with the friends, with the acquaintances, with the job, with the work, with the housing, with everything. It all looked different because I realised I needed to make some substantial changes to reverse the direction of my sin, right? And this is what will happen to you. If you engage the principles, you'll see it apply everywhere. And that's what I'd like to encourage you to do. And so I feel if you can do that, then you'll instead of looking back 10 years and going, oh, I've barely changed, you'll look back 1 year and say, my life's like I can barely keep up with my own life now. You know what I mean? Like in terms of the change. And that's how it can be for a while. But it also means that the changes that will bring you more understanding, more knowledge, more awareness of yourself, more awareness of others, more happiness in your day-to-day life. You'll stop engaging people who bring you so much misery in your life, and you'll deal with your addictions as to why you needed them before. And there's so many things that you will change. And if you've got children, that your relationship with them will change as well. And you'll see the benefits if you put it into practice. But if you don't, 10 years' time, you'll be looking back and going, I've spent 10 years listening to this, and what's the use? No change in my life, what's the use? And oftentimes people look back and go 10 years later and go, wow, I haven't made many changes in the last 10 years. And then they go, well, what's the benefit of divine truth? Then I might as well leave it behind, rather than seeing actually it's because they haven't applied much of it.
Right.
Yeah. You apply God's truth, your life's going to be better every time. Be better every time. Now, when I say better, I'm not going to measure better the same way that the world measures better.
Right.
You won't necessarily have more friends, but you will have better friends. You won't necessarily have more family, you'll have a better family. You won't necessarily have like more money, you'll have ethical money, in your life and so forth. So from God's perspective, it's going to be better. And also, you get to the point where you feel that it's better too. So that's what I'd like to probably end on. That encouragement that you consider that God loves you, He wants to make your life better. His laws are going to make your life better. He loves you. He's not going to make rules for you like a government or institutions make rules. They're often there to control you and pull you down and make your life worse. Well, He's not going to do that. All of His laws and principles are to make your life better. And if we can come to trust God that much, that we believe that His laws and His having His love will make our life better, then you'll definitely have the benefits of that in your day-to-day life. Become sin warriors. Said that in Ireland to a group of people. Just pay for you to listen to that presentation where I talked about being a sin warrior and its benefit, because that's what you need to learn to do. Like, instead of looking at your sin and going, oh, it's so bad, it's so terrible, oh, it's so bad, become like a warrior who says, every sin I get rid of is another benefit to myself, and another benefit to society, and another benefit to the world, and another benefit to my everlasting future. And it's one thing I won't have to deal with later on down the track sometime. Yeah.
There was a little anecdote that I wanted to know. It was related to the principle that we talked about yesterday. Not the principle, sorry, the sin of, like, if I say the truth, I would be attacked.
Can we not have you
okay.
now?
Okay.
Not now. I just want to leave you with this sort of to be inspired, to understand that God cares about you enough to make your life better if you apply His principles. His love and His truth will make your life better. And if you can leave inspired to do that, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.